So, hello everyone. I know you guys are almost all competitors, but this is not about who's better. This is about making all of us better. This is about making the industry better. And we are all here for long term, right? At Core, we live in purpose, and at these crazy times, we want to help agencies become better businesses. So we are excited to have Michael Farmer today with us. Today, with the crisis that advertising is experiencing, it is more important than ever to understand where our inefficiencies are by measuring costs on price per deliverable, who our top performers are, our worst clients, those poorly budgeted services, those unrealistic scope of work, time deviations, and those reworks we have due to clients' constant mind changes. And today, there's no time to make manual, inefficient, and inaccurate reports that would also cost us months to have. We need more than ever to understand what to measure and how to measure it. So Michael is based out of New York, and he's current consultant for WPP, Omnicom, Publicis, IPG, and Dentsu, globally speaking. He's author of Madison Avenue Manslaughter. He's former advisor to Martin Sorrell, who actually made us the introduction. And he's former CEO at Bain, UK, Germany, and France. The conversation is going to be 60 minutes long. The first 40 minutes about Michael Farmer statistics and recommendations, and the other 20 minutes for Q&A. In the meantime, feel free to participate through the chat and put some questions there. For those who stay until the end, Mike will be available to answer any of your questions. So use the chat, start asking questions now. And if you like the podcast, then go check our YouTube channel and see all the content we have there for you. Mike, welcome. Thanks for being with us.
I am so happy to be here with you and your colleagues out there to talk about the steps that agencies have to take today.
Nice. Thank you, Mike. You are very valuable for us, and thanks for being here. So, as a first question, we all know that in these last weeks we've seen major agencies announcing tremendous layoffs. And so, which are some of the negative trends that would threaten agencies' viability, Mike?
Well, Santi, those who might have read my book would know that I think that the industry has actually been in a crisis for the last 15 years through cost reductions driven by fee reductions and workload increases. COVID-19 is just throwing gasoline on an already burning building, I'm afraid. And we've seen the holding companies announce $500 million in cost reductions, downsizing of people, furloughs for senior people. We've seen clients, advertisers cut their spend levels. No one is too sure what to do, but because of the decline of demand, everyone seems to be focusing today on cost reduction as the only strategy. And I'm very concerned about it because during the last 15 years, agencies already did considerable downsizing, leading to a juniorization of their staffs and inadequate number of people to do the growing workloads. So I'm just a little worried that this current effort focusing on cost reduction might be the wrong thing to do, because when we all come out of this healthy, if we do, we need to be strong, not weak.
Yeah. And what do you think that the effects of these chronic cost cuts would be?
Well, it would have the effect of already reducing agency capabilities. let's remember that agency clients have had a tough time since 2008. Brands have not been growing. The number of media channels has expanded significantly. Scopes of work are huge. E-commerce needs to be dealt with. And I think clients coming out of this coronavirus crisis are going to be facing a marketplace that behaves in very different ways. Where are the brains and the effort going to come from? If agencies cost reduce themselves so that they have no senior people, they don't have any strategists, they don't have any imaginative thinkers to deal with the new world that we're going to face. And none of us know what that looks like today. So it really will take some very smart people. I'm worried that all the cost reduction today is going to weaken agencies to where they cannot be good, sound partners for their clients after this is over.
On my understanding, you have been working probably your last 20, 30 years on understanding the scopes of work of these large creative agencies. And
yes.
How would you say that these scopes of work changed through the time?
Well, when I first began in almost 30 years ago in 1992, everyone was paid on commission. And we were looking at TV, radio, print, and most of the work was all original work. There were very few adaptations. Then commissions gave way to labor-based fees, and clients began to globalize, which increased the number of adaptations in their mix. Furthermore, in about 2005, digital media came into its own, followed by social media. There has been a huge expansion in the number of deliverables that creative agencies are carrying out, and a very large fragmentation of the media channels that media agencies have had to plan. I'll just give you a few numbers that will help out.
Sure.
When I started 30 years ago with an agency that had 50 creatives, they were doing only 380 different types of ads, 380 deliverables. Today, or I should say last year, I did an agency with 50 deliverables who did 15,000 deliverables. That's Instagram, Facebook posts, email marketing, direct marketing, web-based commercial operations, etc. Scopes of work have exploded in the number of deliverables. Now, some of those are small. Email marketing is not as big as a TV ad, but nevertheless, if you add up all the different sizes in the 15,000 category for a 50 creative office, it's still a growing workload of about 3% per year for the last 30 years. That's very, very large. At the same time, of course, fees have been in reduction. So growing workloads and declining fees are a very bad formula for agencies.
How do you think conversations should flow today between the agency and the client?
Well, the first thing, Santi, I think that you have to recognize is that scope of work is not a very vigorous conversation today. Clients generate scopes of work on their own and give them to their agencies to do. There isn't a discussion about, is this the right scope of work? Will this move the brands? Is it the right mix of deliverables? Is it the right spend on media? Is it in the right channels? Most of those discussions are taking place within the marketing departments of clients today. And agencies are just being told, here's the scope of work that we've agreed on for this quarter or for this half. And, they're expected to execute. Now, the problem is that fees are not negotiated around the workload, and the agency staffing is not determined according to the workload. So I think the first thing that has to happen, and this crisis should be used For example, if a client goes to the agents, we're cutting a spend by buying our now, we're going to reduce our creative scope of work. The agency should say, we totally understand, but let's not leave this conversation without talking about the nature of the scope of work that we will be left with and the kinds of scope of work that we should be thinking about once we come out of that. Because I think it's a perfect time for agencies to once again get into the dialogue with clients about the quality of the scope of work. Is it the right stuff to do? And talk about the amount of work that the scope of work represents so that fees and resources can be allocated properly.
100% agreed. So you think people like CEOs and CFOs and COOs at agencies should start thinking mostly on how to stay relevant, and probably that is on senior people, right? Not layoffs of them, like of the senior people that wouldn't keep the agency relevant, right? Doing
Right.
the creative stuff.
If I were running an agency today, knowing what I know, I would want to hang on to my senior people. I would want to cut out as much of the work as possible that is the little work, the Facebook post, the Instagram post, the email marketing. Let somebody else do that, because that kind of work doesn't have much strategic content. The other thing that we have to recognize, Santi, is that office heads and regional heads and agency CEOs have not been very engaged in knowing what work their client heads are doing for their clients. So I think this is a time when the senior executives at the agency need to refamiliarize themselves with what work has been going on for each client. How many deliverables? What type of deliverables? Is it the right work? Is there too much work for the people, or is it the right amount of work for the people? What should the work be if it isn't moving the brands? You know, we have many scopes of work today that are very complicated that are having zero impact in the marketplace. So I think it stands to reason that it needs a very close scrutiny, and perhaps the crisis that's caused by COVID-19 would give senior executives the excuse they need to engage with their clients once again about what is in the scope of work, how could a better scope of work be put together for the future.
Couldn't be more aligned. And Mike, so you are talking about scopes of work, about how CEOs should start talking or having different kind of conversations with their clients. What do you think agencies CEOs need to pay attention to during this period?
I think they have to change their mindset. I think they have to become operational business executives. Because let's face it, the thing that is being threatened today is the business economics of an agency. The amount of work it does, what they're paid for it, how many people they can keep on their staff, how good those people are. And I think that agency CEOs have become much too used to thinking that their job is to get new business. Their job is to get new clients. And they leave the operations of the agency to the finance director or to the chief operating officer if they have one. They leave the client affairs to the client head. And I think that agency chief executives and even many office heads have become distant from understanding that they're running a very sophisticated business that that creates many different types of work for many different clients. And I think they need to become familiar with their business operations again. It isn't just about cutting cost. it isn't just about finding new clients. It's about understanding how the agency makes money and what it needs to protect itself during a period when it's going to be forced to shrink.
Yeah. So you're seeing a world where it's less work, but higher quality in the future, requiring a greater percentage of senior people, right?
I think that's the model, because what I've observed over the last decade is that the senior people who are expensive are the ones who have been downsized. And the agency has kept a hold of the junior people who are relatively inexpensive, who are more prepared to do email marketing and Instagram posts and Facebook posts and things of that sort. And a lot of the strategic capability of the agency has been eliminated. So I would say, let's use this crisis to change that, to completely turn it around. Someone said, never let a crisis go to waste. There are so many things that you can do in a crisis that you can't do otherwise. And let the agency chief executive really think about, what do I want to do? Do I want to get rid of my most sophisticated people and keep the cheap junior people that we've got who can do the work today? Or do we need to change the nature of the work that we're doing so that we can really add value in a strategic sense? So if I were an agency CEO person, I would be thinking about how I would maintain my senior staff.
Right. And what your recommendation would be in terms of measuring things? What would you measure?
Well, okay. So here's the thing. Right now, I don't know of a single agency that says, for every client that we have, we will keep track of all of our projects and all of our scopes of work in a uniform way. In other words, if we're working with Nestle, if we're working with Unilever, if we're working with American Express, if we're working with Toyota, if we're working with Nissan, if we're working with Bank of America, I don't care what systems our clients require, we as an agency are going to have a uniform way of documenting our scopes, managing our projects, and generating data so that the chief executive, the chief financial officer, the chief creative officer can all look at the same data about what is happening in our shop. No, so right now, what agencies have done is they've pretty much left it up to the clients. You know, some clients say, we want you to use Decideware. Other people say, we want you to use Smartsheet or some sort of a project management system. I think it's up to the agency to say, wait a minute, do it our way. We're going to have one way of doing this in our New York office, in our London office, in our Sao Paulo office, in our Mexico City office, in Singapore, Shanghai, etc. We're going to have one worldwide system that everyone gets trained in. It's going to document all the project work we do, all the scope of work deliverables. It's going to generate metrics that are uniform by office so that any one of our senior executives can look at our work and understand in a minute how much work we're doing, what type of work it is, and to develop a judgment about whether it's the right kind of work. So, you know, I'm very much in favor with, you know, what you are trying to do with your clients, Santi, because I think that the system that you've developed is something that agencies need, and they need to adopt it on a more global basis because they are lacking the information that they need about project management, the deliverables.
Thanks for the kind words, Mike.
Well,
yeah, and so yeah, totally understandable and totally like 100% agreed. Like CFOs and CEOs and COOs should try to get the same metrics, the same KPIs from each office, and would be better, of course, if they can see all of that in just like one dashboard, right? Like one place where they can see how's Singapore doing, how's Mexico City going, everything, the same metrics in just one dashboard, right?
Yeah, of course, that would make sense. I think the big battle is to get them to recognize that they need to do it. Because if you think about how the agency world has developed, back 30 to 40 years ago, when they were paid on commission, they made a lot of money without having to manage anything. They were paid a 15% commission on what their clients spent on media. And it was enough money that they could afford to use as many people as they wanted, do as many ads as they wanted, and do a lot of other things without ever having to think about it. So many of the senior agency executives today are unfamiliar with the notion that in today's market, with razor thin margins and massive scopes of work, you can't just leave it to the organization to manage any way they want. That's what's happened. I don't know of a single agency that I've worked with in 30 years that has a system, a uniform system that measures scope of work. I don't know of one. And I've worked with everybody. I've worked with Ogilvy, JWT, Y&R before it merged. I've worked with Gray, TBWA, BBDO, Saatchi and Saatchi, Leo Burnett, Publicis USA, McCann Erickson, FCB. I've worked with all of them. I don't know a single chief executive who has yet said, we will manage our scopes of work, our projects in a uniform way everywhere. I don't know of a single one that's done it. So as wonderful as it would be to have a dashboard that would allow you to see all those things, the first step is to get them to recognize that they absolutely have to know how much work they're doing. I mean, because how can you price an operation? How can you price out your services if you don't know how much work you're going to have to deliver? How can you know how many people you need if you don't know the nature of the scope of work? You're leaving it to the client to decide. And when the clients decide how much they're going to pay you and how many people they will afford, believe me, they will not pay you enough and they will not allow you enough people. And that's what's been happening in the industry for the last 15 years. I documented all of that in my book, and it's still a distressingly large problem.
Mike, in one word, what type of mindset do you think agencies should have?
I think that I can see that they need to do two things. One, they have to have a business mindset. They've had a creative mindset throughout the last 30 and 40 years. Now they need to have a business mindset. They have to think about measurement. They have to think about metrics. And they have to think about the workload of their various people. That's the first mindset. The second mindset, I think, is that they need to start pricing. They should be getting premium prices for their services instead of commodity services. If they were proud of the work they did and the results it generated and of their agency capabilities, they should be getting much higher prices than they are currently getting through the work they're doing. So I would say, in answer to your question, Santi, that they need to have a business mindset and a very strong motivation to start getting price premiums based on superior services that lead to positive results for clients.
Great. Thanks, Mike, for that. And here we have a question from Jill that says, what about smaller agencies that are not global? Do they need to keep this same model?
Well, I think a small agency today has certain advantages over the larger agencies. For one thing, the very large agencies owned by the holding companies have to generate an awful lot of income every year in order to meet their budgets for the holding company. And they're under a lot of pressure to do that. A smaller agency doesn't quite have the same pressure, and they actually can take greater risks with the clients by saying, look, if we work together, then I want to assure that we are in a partnership where we have an equal say about what is in the scopes of work, and have a system being on type of levels that we, so that we are assured that we are always working on the right things and being paid for all the work we do. The small agency can develop a much more intimate relationship with clients, I think, and have the capability of generating positive results in the areas of the marketing mix that they're working on. So I'm very keen that small agencies can take advantage of the weaknesses of the large agencies because they can be more nimble, they can be more aggressive in their negotiations, and they probably can show greater pride in the kind of work that they do at the same time.
And Mike, here we have Micha Reese that asks, the classic agency has lost a lot of work. To make the question shorter, it's like they have been in limbo for a long time. How can they become relevant again?
I think the funny thing is it does come back to scope of work, because if you have been merely accepting the scopes of work that your client give you without any question. And by the way, I look at scopes all the time, and most of them are pretty terrible. There are too many deliverables in too many media. There's too much work. Very little of it is strategic. You know, it's what the client wants to do, but it doesn't mean it's the smart thing to do. Agencies will be perceived as relevant when they are equal partners at the table, and when they are prepared to say no, and when they are prepared to argue that the scope of work can be strengthened, that there are too many deliverables, that a smaller scope of work with fewer deliverables of a different type is healthier for the brands, healthier for marketing, and healthier for the agency. So I think agencies should be working very hard to simplify their scopes of work and get the workload and their fees in balance. They shouldn't go ask for more money. They don't need to. They can attack the bloated scopes of work. And I think when they can muster the kinds of arguments with their clients showing that why the scope of work is weak, then they will start to be respected again. I think the problem has been over the last 10 years or so that agencies have been so desperate to hang on to their income that they've just become passive, and they've been willing to do anything the client has asked. And they haven't put up a good fight about scopes of work, fees, resources, and they even haven't engaged in dialogues about what it will take to get the brands moving again. It's when you have points of view about what it will take to get brands moving again that you start to earn respect, particularly if you're good, you know, if you've put together good arguments.
Right. So for those who stay until the end, Mike is just started to answer questions. So please feel free to use the chat here. And we have Mike here. We have the CEO at BBDO Chile, who's asking, when at COVID ends, there's a lot of people trying to work remotely. Do you think this could be, this could kill the culture of the agencies?
Well, no, I don't think so, because I think a culture is defined by what you do, how you gather. And I think the culture of an agency needs to be strengthened today, but I don't think that happens by bringing everybody together in the same building. I mean, let's face it, when we work in offices, we sit at our desks, sometimes with earphones on, listening to music, looking at our screen and doing what we're doing. Agencies are not hotbeds of open collaboration. I mean, for the most part, everybody is doing their own thing for the day and then occasionally meeting in groups in order to do something about it. I've discovered, I think, along with many other people, that working remotely like this with Zoom or with other software packages can bring about the same degree of collaboration as long as there is a purpose for the work. And in fact, the organizers of the work have to be even better organized to make the meetings meaningful. So no, listen, I suspect that remote working is going to be with us for a long time in many different forms, and I think that we will get very good at using it. I do think that groups of people can be bound together if they feel proud of their purpose, if they feel confident in the quality of the work they're doing. And I think that that's the area that should receive our attention, not whether or not we're going to all be in one office working together.
Right. Mike, how can digital agencies move away from hourly rate model into one that is more commensurate with talent and ability?
Well, the first thing is you've got to come to grips with what exists in the agency office today. Nobody knows how much work there is. So it's premature to talk to clients about being paid on some basis other than an hourly basis. I think the first thing that a CEO or a CFO needs to do is to sit down with every client with some kind of software like Core and review how much work are we carrying out on each of our clients in the office? And which of those clients do we think we're being underpaid on, or we're doing too much work for, or we don't have enough resources? When you identify those and you put together arguments for how it could be handled in a different way, then you're in a position to open up a dialogue with your clients. Now, look, I've done this in the past, even with poor information. I have negotiated pay by deliverable for a couple of agencies. I did it with JCPenney. I did it with Lenovo. I did it with TD Ameritrade. I've done it with a number of clients, and it wasn't that hard to do because there are many people in procurement who actually want to know what work the agency is doing for the fee. And gladly, with open arms, are prepared to look at a form of remuneration based on how much work is being done, as opposed to how many bodies are on the the staffing sheet. So, but I think the first thing is you have to come to grips with what you're doing in your own house before you can engage several clients in a discussion about this.
I'm happy, Mike, that you made your first partnership with a solution. That Core is the first solution you partnered with on the last 30 years you have been in business. It means a lot to us.
Well, Santi, I mean, what the truth is. I have developed my own systems for keeping track of scope of work and calculating what the fees and the resources should be. I've had different forms of my own system for 10 years. I've originally developed it with Toyota in 2004. What is that, 16 years ago? When I saw your system, I said, mine doesn't even hold a candle to it. I would rather try to bring my functionality into your system than try to duplicate what you've been able to do. So I just took a very practical decision because I was amazed by what the Argentinians have been able to do here.
Great, yeah. I mean, it was a long run. I mean, we needed to raise a couple of $1 million to build the product we built, and we're still on that. I mean, we're improving the product every day, and And I'm happy that you are bringing all your knowledge to our solution. The partner we made to tackle the global CEOs and CFOs of these large creative agencies. I mean, it's something that we need to do in order to make the industry great again, would say someone here in this country.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think agencies have been neglectful of the work that they are handling. I can understand how it developed that way if you understand the history of the industry. But to allow clients to cut fees every year, to have the workloads grow every year, and to have to downsize in order to make margins is just a terrible strategy. And that has been the strategy of most agencies for more than 15 years. It has to change. I think we're getting very close to the point where certain agencies are going to go bust, because it would only take the loss of one or two major clients to where they can no longer support their overhead and they can't support their people. So we're in a crisis situation, not just because of COVID-19. We're in a crisis situation because we're at the end of a 30-year journey of cost reduction based on not knowing how much work needs to be done. So something has to change. And I think CORE came along. I think your timing was brilliant. It was in the last 2 years. People have been buying my book in the last 5 years. I think there's a greater awareness of how important it is. It's really, this is the time. This is the time. It isn't 5 years from now. It isn't even 3 years from now. It's now, because now we really need the fire department coming in, because COVID-19 has just added fuel to the fire that was already burning. So I'm just saying to all of our friends out here that are listening in, this COVID-19 crisis is the crisis to be exploited to do something different than what you've been doing for the last 15 years. There's very little runway anymore. The plane is 3/4 of the way down the runway and we're running out of space for the takeoff. So I think something very, very important and transformational needs to be done in the next year or two, or we're going to see the holding companies broken up. We're going to see agencies going bust. Look what happened to MDC, as a holding company. It's just unhappy. It's unhappy, and something has to happen.
Yeah. I remember talking with Martin Sorrell, and like he listening to what we were doing, and he said like, "Hey, do you know Michael Farmer? You guys should meet right away." So here we are. And Mike, we have some couple other questions here. And what's the relationship between measuring and managing the business?
Between measuring and managing the business?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, Peter Drucker, who, is the guru of management, said that a manager has a number of responsibilities, but one is setting objectives for people, and 2, measuring performance. And so measures are the way that you can have an objective discussion with an individual in your organization about whether they're accomplishing what needs to be accomplished in the objective. So let me give you an example around scope of work. Let's say that an agency has an advertiser and they're doing 1,000 deliverables. The 1,000 deliverables adds up to a certain amount of work. If it's 1,000 emails, it's a small amount of work. If it's 1,000 TV commercials, it's huge. So you have to have a unit of work that you can use to measure it. Okay. Now, once you've measured it, you can evaluate whether your pricing, your fees, and your resources are appropriate. But monitoring the work is setting out an objective. Let's say the objective is we're going to cut the number of deliverables from 1,000 to 800. We're going to cut it by 20%. And I'm going to give the responsibility to the client head to negotiate that with the client. Now, measuring is how you know how much work there is. Monitoring is tracking performance. It's not the same thing, but you can't track performance unless you have measurements. So any system has to give you the ability to both measure happening and to give you that data over time so that you can monitor performance and give feedback to the people who have the responsibility, to coach them if they're not succeeding. But you have to have both the monitoring system and the measurement system.
Is there a way to sustain an agency now that work is so project-based versus retainer?
Well, look, a retainer is nothing more than a check, an amount of money that covers all the work that's in it. So even agencies that are paid on a retainer basis are project-based. They're still doing deliverables. My whole business for 30 years has been to go into agencies, gather their scopes of work in whatever form they're in, and then put them in a uniform system to where we can measure them and monitor them. Now, I did that with my system. I'll do it with your system, but that's what I've done. So I've been able to look at these scopes of work, right? And they're too varied. So even agencies on a retainer system still are doing deliverables. And what you need to do is to find out whether that single retainer is enough for all the projects in the system.
Great. This was an answer for the agency moving image and content. And Mike, here we have a question from an attendee that says, how can we negotiate fees on this during this coronavirus moment? What are your recommendations in order to define these SOUs?
Okay, I don't think this is the time to negotiate fees. I think this is the time to begin a dialogue about the content of the scopes of work, because they're going to be shrinking, and to start planning for the types of scope of work that will emerge in September, October, after the summer. So I think that this is a time not to talk about money or a different form of payment. I think it's too early for that. Plus, I don't think agencies are ready for that either. I think that instead, when the client comes to you and says, we're cutting the spend, I'm going to have to cut your fees, we're not going to do 6 campaigns, we're going to cut the scope of work, that's the time to say, let's spend some time together examining with a critical eye the scopes that we currently have after they're cut. And we want to come back to you with some recommendations about what the scope should look like when we are back in a growth phase after this immediate crisis. That is when you should be prepared. After this is over, you should be prepared to recommend a scope of work and show them how you would price it. In other words, you're not negotiating. You're not saying throw out the old system. You will say, here's the scope that we recommended, and here's how we would calculate a fee for that. This is our methodology. That's what you start with. And then if they're open to talking or negotiating it, to do that. By the way, right now during this coronavirus, I have had a major advertiser, I can't mention its name, but everyone would know it. And they've come to me and said, we want to pay our agencies by deliverable everywhere in the world. We need a system. We want to use your system for determining what that price should be based on based on the agency economics. Like Czechoslovakia isn't going to be the same as the UK, isn't going to be the same as Mexico, isn't going to be the same as New York. But anyway, they're going to implement that probably sometime in the fall. So I know that procurement people they're not stupid, and they know that they're buying product, not man hours. So I think the time to do this is sometime in the fall, after you use this crisis to come to grips and to understand the scopes that you've actually got today. Yeah.
There's Ricky Jabaroni here. A question very related to the previous one, but in some terms different. That says, it seems more and more clients don't want to pay for ideas, but want to pay for tangible assets and deliverables. How to present and add the proper values to ideas and creativity?
Okay, well, I don't think clients should pay for ideas. They should be paying for something that's like a package of work that they believe is going to influence their performance in the marketplace. Now, that's not the same thing as saying ideas. What is an idea? Unfortunately, for too many agencies, an idea is a positioning statement, or it's a tagline. McDonald's, "I'm loving it," is an idea. And it's been a great idea for hanging a lot of ads on. But it is not necessarily the idea that drives sales for McDonald's. What drives sales for McDonald's is whatever the scope of work is and how it's communicating to consumers, motivating them to buy at McDonald's. So I don't think agencies should want to be in the sale of ideas, a business. I think agencies should want to be in the business of selling packages of work that are going to succeed in the marketplace. And of course, ideas are buried in them. They're embedded in it. But the great danger for agencies is they get disintermediated, meaning the client says, I'll use such and such an agency for ideas on my brands, and I'll pay them for that. And then I'll hire other people to do the execution. Believe me, they're not going to pay anything for the ideas. Nothing. They're going to pay very little for it. So what you want to do is not unbundle ideas from execution. You want the ideas to be so good that they drive brand sales. And what you're selling to clients is your ability to put together a package of creative work and other types of operational work and strategic work that'll actually move the brand. That's what they have to believe in. Don't go out there selling ideas. You just won't get a good price for it.
Great. And here is Edward Frederick, who asks, Mike, what do you think about agencies that are? I'm translating different questions.
Okay.
Some of them are in English, some of them are in Spanish, like this one. So that's why I'm trying to translate. It says, Mike, what do you think on traditional creative agencies transforming into like integral agencies?
Okay, I think it's necessary. I think it's necessary because you would rather be a single agency providing multiple services to a client than one of 20 agencies, each of them doing their own thing. So I think agencies have to be fully integrated. On the other hand, the problem is just because an agency is fully integrated across disciplines doesn't mean every discipline is equal. And I think that there you need strong leadership in an integrated agency to recommend the right media mix and media spend to a client for a set of creative deliverables. In other words, just because you're Just because you can do TV and radio and print and CRM and direct marketing and web design and social media and search, just because you can do all those things doesn't mean it's the right mix for the client. The only danger if an agency has too many people in each of those areas is they'll start selling scopes of work so they can keep their people busy. That's not what you want to do. It would almost be better to have enough capacity to satisfy any scope of work and then use freelancers for the last 20% of your capacity if you need to do more search, or if you need to do more television, or if you need to do more social posting. But I think integration is very important. I think it's important to know what type of a mix will work for certain brands, and that's what agencies should be recommending.
Mike, another question says, for small independent agencies, what do you think is the most important thing they have to offer compared to the big ones? What should they offer that the big ones are not giving them?
I think they should say, our mission is not to do creative work. Our mission is not to do executions for you. Our mission is to work in partnership with you to deliver improved brand results. And we do whatever is needed to ensure that that happens. I don't know of a single big agency who says that its mission is to help clients perform in the marketplace. I know many good small agencies that have very good niche businesses and some very strong client relationships who are there because that is their mission. Because there is a difference. If you think your mission is to be creative, it doesn't necessarily mean that your scopes of work are going to make a big difference in the marketplace. I'll give you a perfect example, and I apologize to anybody if I'm offending them. Burger King is known as one of the most creative advertisers in the world. The chief marketing officer was named CMO of the year. Burger King was named, as the most creative advertiser at Cannes. Its agencies win awards for the different commercials. The truth of the matter is that over the last 10 years, Burger King has barely grown its sales per restaurant. In fact, it has slipped from number 10 to number 22 among its competitors. And McDonald's and many of the other Chick-fil-A and many of its competitors have grown their sales per restaurant. So it can definitely be demonstrated that even highly creative work doesn't always move the needle when it comes to sales or performance. And I think that the big agencies are still selling their creativity as their product in the belief that that will win them business. But the truth of the matter is that all that creativity hasn't done an awful lot for brand growth. You almost today have to be like a consulting firm with creative capabilities to be effective as a small agency in the marketplace. And I would encourage my small agency clients to think that way. I say, think that you are like the Boston Consulting Group in terms of analysis with a creative capability, or a Bain with a creative capability, that your client service people are really, really helping their clients figure out why a brand is stuck, why it isn't going anywhere, how the marketplace has changed, what the marketplace needs. Is it a pricing issue? Is it a product issue? Is it a segmentation issue? What is it? And then do the creative work that's needed to fix it. So being like a consulting firm with creative capabilities is the mindset I think that a smaller agency needs to have. And it's very easy to compete against the big agency with that positioning.
Great, Mike. And we are hitting into the last 5 minutes. So we're going to end with these last two questions. Here's one that says, the clients have so many options so they can pick among different campaigns. So in the future, do you think it's an industry of projects as producer companies?
I think if it becomes an industry of projects, that it's not going to go anywhere. Because I think the projects will always be priced at a commodity level. And even if someone is very good at doing projects and even very good at pricing them, you'll never get a price premium. The only way to get a price premium for your services is to bundle them and then offer such high value as a result of working together that the benefits exceed the cost. So no, I think not to make the business up. Departments are all their time putting out RFPs and shopping around agencies and getting people to bid against each other. That isn't what you want. You don't want to have to bid against anybody else. You want to be the only agency in the world that delivers high value for what you do. And you don't want anyone to understand how you do it. You want it to be magical. You really want it to be magical. You don't want it to be something that's so transparent that anybody can duplicate it. Whereas if you're, just good at doing projects, you're going to always accept the lowest price. So please, please resist becoming project-based firms and work your way back into having relationships that require a bundling of services.
Mike, what does the agency of the future looks like to you? Can you mention a couple of global examples you think are setting the bar as far as this agency of the future today?
No, I cannot. And I'm very sorry to say that because I have worked very hard for 30 years with many people to get them there. I will say the agency of the future is a problem-solving organization. It's problem-solving. It is highly analytical. It understands at least three things. It understands why brands are not growing. Now, let's take demographics. My generation, which is the baby boomers, are dying out. The millennial, much younger generation is bigger and is growing, but they buy in a different way. So all of the marketing that was based on the successes of selling to my generation is probably not very relevant. We need new ways of thinking. So I think the agency of the future is has very analytical client service people who want, first of all, to understand why are brands underperforming? What is it about the nature of distribution, pricing, competitors, and all those other factors that's keeping them from growing? Secondly, they need to be good at knowing what type of media mix and spend will get to a corrective solution. And by the way, very few people today have the slightest idea of what works in media. Nobody knows. What's the mix of TV, print, radio, social, digital, and direct marketing? Nobody knows anymore. So the agency of the future has a very good idea about what media mix and media spend will actually work. And then the third thing they can do is put together the creative scope of work that will most effectively address the media mix. So it's a combination of sophistication about business performance, brand performance in the marketplace, of an understanding of complicated media, and an understanding of creative scopes of work. And I think most agencies today fall very short on all of those. They don't have the analytical. The media is handled by somebody else, and the creative scopes of work are just being given to them. So there's a lot of room for agencies to say, look, we're going to be better at this. We're going to become expert in brand performance. We're going to become expert in recommending media mix and spend. We're going to become expert in putting together scopes of work that we can afford to do for a reasonable price. That's a huge transformation challenge. I think it's doable. I think any agency that is led by a strong chief executive and has that as a mission can accomplish it. It might mean hiring different types of people. It might mean investing in systems like the systems that you offer, Santi. And it might mean completely changing the nature of the sales pitch. But it's completely doable, and nobody's doing it today. So it's a wide open opportunity. The risk is the consulting firms will get there first. The consulting firms like Accenture and Deloitte and IBM that have been buying agencies will become the consulting firms that have creative or media capabilities. You don't want them to get there first. So that's the direction I think things have to go. And it means walking away from the positioning, we're creative. That's who we are. We're just good at creativity. Let me tell you, I think anybody that hangs on to that positioning is going to be dead in 5 years, because it just isn't going to it isn't going to pay the salaries or pay for the talent or pay for the overhead, because clients aren't buying creativity. They're trying to buy results, but they're not being very successful at it.
Right. At this crisis at Core, we are happy to help agencies become more profitable. That means also retaining talent and having better clients, right? So we are very happy to partner Michael here in the US, and we want to thank you all. I'm seeing some new questions. Lindsay, Handon, please, you can shoot that on an email to us. So thank you all, and thank you, Mike, for being here. You have been of a great value, and hope to see you again on our next video podcast.
Yeah, just send me the email questions and I'll be happy to answer them, Santi.
Yeah,
okay?
I'll do that. Great.
Good. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.